Hey y'all! In this video, I'm going to get into and demonstrate the Vector Validator tool. During live Q&A number 86, I had a question about the Vector Validator tool, and a viewer asked, how do we go about cleaning up after we have used the Vector Validator? So let's go ahead and get into it. I'm going to go into my draw text window, and I'm going to create some text out here that I know has problems. I'm going to be using the Abigail font, which I featured in a previous video on how not all script fonts work well for VCarving. And I'll put a link to that video down in the description box of this video, and I'll put a link in a card up here right about now. So let's go ahead and create my text. And I'm going to use the same phrase I used in that video. And I'll anchor that on my X0, Y0, and we'll close it. Already I need to do some space adjusting here. So I'll come up here to Edit Text Spacing and Curve, and I'm going to bring my cursor down here between these two lines of text, and I'm going to click. And just keep clicking until I close up the gap between those two lines of text to something that I prefer. That looks a lot better there. Now we'll go ahead and press F9 on the keyboard to center that text in my material. Now I'll go back into standard selection mode. Now, in that previous video, I said that not all fonts will work well for VCarving. And this is an example. This is one of them. The problems are based on the fact that this font was never meant to be VCarved or cut out of a piece of material. It was designed to be flooded with either printer ink or laser toner. And when you're flooding something with ink or toner, intersections like this, where the vectors crisscross one another, or here, those kind of things just don't matter because it's all going to be filled in. But when we're talking in terms of vectors for VCarving or profile cutting, things like this do matter because it drives the software crazy. So what we need to do is figure out a way to identify the problem areas. Some are easy. You can see this T runs into the top of the H, and you can see this X blends in with the T. Well, some of them are easy to identify, but others really aren't. But what I'm going to need to do before I do anything else, however, is I'm going to need to convert this text object to curves so that I can edit the individual vectors. So, with all these vectors selected, I'll right-click and convert to curves. Click on that, and we've just changed that text object into vectors that are now editable. Now I want to use my Vector Validator tool, which is over here under Edit Objects, the second row, the last icon. Now the Vector Validator will check for issues, but it will only repair one type of issue automatically. Let's start up here at the top of the form and take a look. It says if there is no selection, all visible vectors on the current side of the current sheet on visible layers will be validated. Let's break that down. If there is no selection, well, I have my text selected. If I didn't have my text selected, it would search every vector on this side of the project. Well, since it's a single-sided project, that's not an issue. On the current side of the current sheet, I only have one sheet. I'm not setting up multiple sheets for a production run. On visible layers, I only have one layer and it is visible. All visible vectors will be validated. So I don't have to select all of my text. If you look at this button right here, it says Search Selected. If I click off, it says Search All. This comes in handy because I may not want to search all of this text. I may only want to search that word. And it'll let me search that selected. If I do want to validate all of these vectors, I don't have to select any of them. Now it's going to mark and identify these three types of issues: zero-length spans, overlaps, and intersections. A zero-length span is best described as one point or node sitting right on top of another. This happens a lot when you're importing DXF files. The software works within a tolerance of 4 positions to the right of the decimal, whether you're using metric or imperial. So if you have 2 points that are closer together than that, the software reads them as being one on top of another, so the span between those 2 points has a length of 0. So the simple way of thinking of this is within your vectors, you have 2 points that are right on top of one another. It'll also check for overlaps. And an overlap is where one vector is sitting on top of another vector. The example they show here is a rectangle and a square, where a vector from the rectangle is sitting on top of the vector of the square. They run parallel on top of one another. An intersection is where you have 2 vectors that cross that are perpendicular to one another. They don't run parallel. So, for instance, you have the top of my capital T, the flourish up here, intersecting with the top of the H here. There are 4 intersections right there. There aren't any overlaps, they're intersections. I can see other intersection issues out here as well. So let's go ahead and run the Vector Validator. I'm going to go ahead and search all. Click on that, and we see these symbols out here pop up. Now, if we look back over here, this is telling us what it has found. There are no zero-length spans to concern ourselves with, but I do have 4 overlaps and 24 intersections. Now, these can be identified by whatever symbol is under this red square. So up here, I have a red square with an equal sign. That's telling me that that's an overlap. Over here, I have a red square with a plus sign. That's telling me that's an intersection. Currently, the only issue that the software will repair automatically is a zero-length span. And what it will do is it will remove one of the points that are sitting on top of one another. If one of those points happens to be a start point, it will delete the other point. It will not delete or change a start point. It will give preference to the start point and delete the other. And the way to fix the zero-length spans is this button will light up here if you have any. You click that button and it will fix the zero-length spans by deleting one of those 2 points. The software will not currently automatically fix any overlaps or intersections, mainly because it doesn't know what you want to do. For instance, do I want to keep this intersection here and let my capital T come this way? Or do I want to eliminate these intersections by welding these together? They're both options, but it doesn't know what I want to do. So, my point in this is, most of these repairs will have to be done manually. And there are several ways of doing this. This might mean tracing new vectors over the top of the vectors with issues. It might mean node editing and manually trimming or deleting spans or adding points. Let's take a look at one of those examples. We have the letter A down here. We have an intersection. So we'll zoom in real close, and we can see that there is the intersection. We have this vector comes up this way to a point up here, then swoops back down this way, creating this intersection. Well, we can't really get to it because that symbol is in the way. So I'll close the Vector Validator so we can see the intersection. I'll select the vector, tap the letter N to go into node editing, put my cursor back over that intersection, and I can either right-click and insert a point using the context menu, or I can select the vector in node editing, and hold my cursor right over that intersection, tap the letter I, and insert a point. After I have inserted that point, I no longer need this one. I can hover my cursor above it, tap the letter D to delete that point, and that intersection is now gone. That trimmed these vectors down to this point here. Yes, I did lose a little bit of height on my letter A, but if we zoom back out, click off to deselect, be honest, can you tell? That is one of those details that is so small, it would never be noticed and it would not be missed, and to be fair, probably would not have even been carved. So, that's one example of one type of repair that would have to be done. Now I can tap the letter F to center up my drawing, come back over to the Vector Validator, search all again, and I no longer have that intersection there, and I have 23 intersections now. Let me close this and go back up here to this capital T because this is an example of an extreme case. I'm going to just select the capital T by itself, use the Vector Validator, and search the selected. And we see here I have 2 overlaps and 4 intersections. The intersections I have are these 4 here. There's 2 here and 2 here. The overlaps are 2 vectors right here. Let me click off to deselect everything and close my Vector Validator, and we see that this is more or less just a straight line that wouldn't be cut anyway. Looks like just an open vector. Here we have this top vector crossing over this bottom vector. Now we need to figure out how we want to fix this. Well, we have a couple of different options. One is we can select this vector, tap N, go into node editing, then move these points around, or we could cut the vector and draw an arc, just replace it. I'm going to go ahead and move the points. I want to take this bottom vector here. I want to grab this point right here by putting my cursor over it, click, and drag it down. Not that much. I want to click and drag down this point just a little bit. Now, maybe nudge that up slightly. Zoom in, nudge that up just slightly. Click off, and now I've gotten rid of those two intersections. Just by moving this vector here, and I didn't need to make many adjustments to the points at all. That's one example of a repair that we can do rather easily. Over here we have a different issue entirely. What we have is we have a closed vector here that is positioned and sized in such a way that it pushes outside of our outside perimeter vector. For this, I'm going to come out of node editing by typing the letter N, and I'm going to do a little bit of adjustment on this vector here. So I'll select it, then select it once again to go into Move and Transform mode, and I'm going to rotate this vector slightly, clockwise, then release, and that was to try to align this curve a little bit better with this curve here. Now I'm going to zoom in closer, and I'm going to use my cursor left key on my keyboard to kind of nudge it over slightly. That's a little better. Now I'll click off and deselect. Now from here, what I'll want to do is select this closed vector, tap N to go into node editing, and I'm just going to drag these 2 points inwards to get it inside of this vector, and then I'll do some adjusting. So let me rotate this point here, rotate this point, and pull that out a little bit. Let's pull this one in to kind of smooth that out. And let's rotate this one in. I rotated this one too much. I think I can go ahead and delete this point just by hovering my cursor over it, tapping the letter D, and we'll adjust these like so. There we go. Click off, and that looks a lot better. We've gotten rid of those 2 intersections. Now I can zoom back out, and that leaves us with this up here. This is a little bit more complex. So what I'll do is I'm going to select these in Node Edit, and I'll come along here, put my cursor over this point, tap the letter C to cut that vector right there. And I'm going to do the same thing right here. Tap the letter C, cut that vector right there. Then I'll click off to deselect, tap N to come out of node editing. Now the reason I went ahead and cut the vector is because what I want to do is I want to draw 2 new arcs and then get rid of these vectors here. So I'll come over here to Draw Arc, and I'll start with the outside. I'll come over here to this end point. You see the crosshairs. I'll click once to start my arc, and I'll come over here to this point. Click again, and that sets the length of my arc. Now I want to bring up my radius. I'll come up to about right here, and I'm lining it up, and I'll click. I'm lining it up on this right here. Now I want to start another arc. So I'll bring it in here to this end point, click, come over to this point as well, click, zoom out, and I want to bring my arc up to about right here. Click, and I'm basing that, I'm watching this area here. That looks okay. Now I can close my arcs. And now I want to select from left to right. Go up above these vectors. Select from left to right. Draw a box around those vectors out here. And then come over and tap the delete key on my keyboard. So that gets rid of those vectors there. Now I want to come back in and select that portion of the vector and delete it. Now I have a much nicer looking flourish on the top of that capital T. I'll select all of the outside profile. And I have 3 open vectors. I want 1 closed vector. I'll join them. Close. And now I have 1 solid vector for the outside of my capital T. So my capital T is fixed here. Now I have another capital T here. Rather than go through all of that again, I'll just select that capital T, delete it, select this capital T, select it again to go into Move and Transform mode. I'll hold down Control, click on the center box, and bring it down here, and align it just by eye. Bring it down just a little bit, and maybe bump it over 1. That looks good. So now let me go back into my Vector Validator. We'll search all. And by fixing this letter T, then copying it down here, we're now down to 15 intersections from the 24 we started with. Well, not all intersections need that much work. For instance, I can take my trim tool, come up here, and I know I want this all joined. So I'll just come in, clip those 4. And the same thing down here. I can either trim these like I just did there, or I can weld them. Trim this down here. And there we go. I could have welded these together, but once I trimmed these up here, I couldn't weld these down there. It was either or, you can't do both. So let's go back to the Vector Validator and see what I've got now. I still have 7 intersections. Some of these are fairly simple, like this T right here, for example. We have that 1 intersection. And this long flourish out here doesn't help it any. I don't think it adds to the design. So I'll just zoom in and clip that away. And we'll do the same thing up here on this small eye. We'll just clip that away. So I didn't even need to go into node editing to fix that kind of thing. So you begin to get my point. There are a multitude of ways of cleaning up vectors when using the Vector Validator. The point that I'm making in this video is that the only issue that can be fixed automatically is the 0 length span, because the software knows what to do. Any other issues you have within the Vector Validator, you are going to have to clean up manually, because the software can't anticipate what you want to do. So just for the record, we'll go ahead and search all. I have no overlaps. I have 5 intersections. And those are, again, more things like this flourish that comes down too far here and crisscrosses over itself. And this vector that crisscrosses over itself here, which will be fixed in the same way I have already demonstrated. And the same here, where this vector crisscrosses outside of this one. Again, we use node editing to drag this vector down inside and drag this vector down inside. Using the Vector Validator before you get to the tool pathing step is preferable. But every once in a while, we're working on a project that we think looks just fine and we don't know we have an issue. So we'll come over and I want to VCarve this. I'll go into a VCarve engraving toolpath. I'm not going to use a flat depth. I'm going to select I'll use a 6mm 15-degree V-bit. Select that. And I'm not going to use any clearance tools. I'll calculate it. And we get an error message. The selected vectors may contain overlaps or intersections, which may lead to unexpected results. This is usually a person's initiation, the first time they would use the Vector Validator. Because it's asking, would you like to use the Vector Validator to locate them or continue anyway? Now you can continue. You can click continue anyway, and it will calculate the toolpaths as it sees fit. Let's go ahead and do that. Now it's telling me that the tool is going to cut through the material. Let's cancel. Let's go back and find these issues. The easy way. Calculate, go to Vector Validator. Search selected, and we come up with our intersections. These intersections are just enough to where the software thinks it has to cut through the material because it's cutting a large area. That's why this is important. So, I'm not going to go through and finish cleaning up this text because it's not important that this text looked perfect for this demonstration. What's important is to understand that the Vector Validator is there to help you identify issues, whether you think you have any issues or not. Now you'll notice that there is a check mark box here for V-carving mode. What V-carving mode does is it focuses the attention of the Vector Validator on the areas within the vectors that will be V-carved. Without V-carving mode, the software doesn't know if I want to pocket this out, profile this, or V-carve it. So it's going to look for issues that affect everything. If I go into V-carving mode, it's going to look for issues within the vectors that would affect V-carving and put its priority there. I, generally speaking, don't use V-carving mode. I haven't found any advantage to using it in the type of work I do. You, on the other hand, may have a different experience. So you can try both. You can't hurt anything by trying both. And it may work better for you. So, I hope you got something out of this video. And if you did, I hope you'll give me a thumbs up. Just as a reminder, today at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, right here on my YouTube channel, I'll be hosting a live Q&A session where we can discuss anything I've demonstrated in this video. Again, that's today at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, right here on my YouTube channel, and I'll put a link to that Q&A session down in the description box of this video. Now, these live Q&A sessions are a great reason to go ahead and subscribe to my channel if you're not already a subscriber. And when you click that subscribe button, click that little bell right next to it. Then you'll be notified the next time I post a video and the next time I go live. So I hope to see you this afternoon for the live Q&A session. And as always, whether you subscribe to my channel or not, I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to watch, and y'all take care.